Hey everybody, Jess here with Skagazine, here with my co-host Eric and punk rock Ryan.
Hello, how's everybody doing out there?
What's
Good,
up,
how are you
everybody?
guys?
Hey Ryan, they couldn't see you do that whole finger thing. You gotta tell them what you're doing.
I do it every time, though.
But
Every freaking
nobody
time. It
knows.
never fails.
Nobody
Well,
knows.
it's my default. Sorry.
That's fair.
One day I'll share video and everybody will know.
Sometimes you got to do things just for the sake of doing it, not for the recognition, you know?
Absolutely.
You sure?
So we have a really special guest tonight from Mustard Plug. I won't tell you who it is yet, even
It's
though I
Dave.
think I kind of leaked that on the internet at some point.
It's Dave.
Fine, it's Dave. Anyway,
Hi, Dave.
Hey, what's going
Hey,
on?
Dave.
Fives.
It's Dave.
I thought instead of our normal, like, hey, what shows have you guys been to? We could talk about how we first heard of Mustard Plug because for me, it's been 28 years almost that I've been listening.
Crazy.
And I first heard the song You on the Cinema Beer Nuts comp, which was an awesome comp with what Voodoo Glow Skulls, MXPX, Link 80. I forget who else was on it, but it was a good comp, and that's where I first heard Mustard Plug. How about you guys?
Oh, I heard of Mustard Plug long before I finally made it to a show. You guys did a show at Rebels in Mount Pleasant many
Yeah.
moons ago. And people were talking about it, but I did not. I didn't make it. My first show was actually the Ska show in 22. And I dropped my phone in the pit that night, and the mustard bottle found it for me. And I came back unscathed.
Amazing.
And there was a lot of Michigan ska that was at that show that night, but we didn't know each other at that point in time. But later on, we started sharing pictures and videos, like, "Oh, I'm right there! Oh, she's right there!" And that show was kind of like a uniting moment for a lot of us as far as our taste in music and how influential Mustard Plug's been for us.
Cool. Cool. Which show was that? Was that in Detroit or Grand Rapids or?
That was the Grand Rapids show, actually, with
Oh, right on.
Coffin Cats and Dance
Yeah.
Contraption.
Cool. Yeah, I remember that one well.
Yeah.
Right on. Very cool.
Is it
Eric?
my turn?
Eric, have a
Yeah.
good Mustard Plug story?
No, I was gonna go with I don't know if anyone knows the come to Jesus conversations where you get baptized, you have to be like, well, the moment I accepted my Lord and Jesus Christ, it's the day, right? And and there's some folks who don't know because they've always just been into that. Like it's been their thing since they've been like two. Growing up in Michigan, like I don't know the exact moment I heard a mustard plug. I just know that you have always been in my life. So so mustard plug has just kind of always been there. I'd also I'm here's my brag and don't you say it. I am also filming from location in Grand Rapids today, which is
Oh, sweet.
down right. So we're close by. I thought
He's
about
in your
showing up.
backyard. He's just not telling you that's
I
why it's
was
on
going to, but A, I don't know where you live, and
Yeah.
B, it would probably freak you out if I knocked on the window in 5 minutes.
That'd be kind of weird. Right on. No, I tell you, like those Cinema Beer Nuts CDs, and like back in the days of those, like 40 bands on this CD, and it cost
Mhm.
$3.99. Like every label had one, but like Hopeless that we were affiliated with at the time had the Cinema Beer Nuts and Cinema Beer Goggles, and so many people discovered us and discovered a lot of other
Mhm.
bands at the time. Those were just really cool. I kind of miss that.
Yeah.
It really exposed us to a lot of people. I mean, it's funny because today, I mean, a lot of people have Spotify, and it's like they have access to everything. But Spotify, like everything on the internet's but just been taken over by an algorithm. So you just kind of get fed the same shit over and over. And it's
Mhm.
actually harder for people to get introduced to new stuff. You have to you have to be conscious about it. You have to like go around the algorithm to find stuff, it seems like. So yeah, I kind of miss those days in certain ways.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think today, going to the big festivals with all the different bands kind of replaced the comp albums for me because I
Yeah,
discover
yeah.
more bands that way than I would on a CD back then or whatever.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the cool things about, big festivals and ska in general. I think it's really good at like grouping up bands and that sort of thing. So it's a
Hmm.
cool scene community like that.
So, Dave, we were talking about, or I was trying to explain it, but you would probably explain it better. We were talking about the time Maroon 5 opened for you guys. Maybe you could share that story with our listeners.
Yeah, so we had a show at the Shelter, which is in the basement of St. Andrews Hall in Detroit. And the show had already been booked, and we had like at least one of our there's always been a great local ska scene in Detroit. So we had one of our friends' bands on it and whatever. And then the promoter said, like, hey, we're putting Maroon 5 on your show. And we're like, we didn't really have a choice in the matter or whatever. It was just like, that's the way it was, and we're like, oh, okay. And at first I'm like, that might be cool. Is that ska band from England? And because there was a band called Maroon Town at the time. And I was like, oh, this could be cool. And then I realized later, oh no, that's Maroon Town, not Maroon 5. And so they played, and it was just like, I don't know. I think maybe I had just a bad attitude that night, but they were just, kind of cheesy pop music, and you could tell that they were really trying to like break out and, become this big thing. And their manager, so they had some big, powerful manager that could just muscle their way onto shows, right? And we, despite the fact we'd been a band for a while and, earned the right to headline the show, they just got Foster like thrown it on the gig. And I was kind of resentful about that. And basically, during our set, I'm like, hey, want to thank all the bands, Maroon 5. I can't remember what I said. But I indicated like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I guess it wasn't complimentary. I guess we didn't pick this band, so hopefully you like them. If not, I don't even remember. And it was one of those things that like, it probably was rude, but I also was like resentful that like this big corporate band and their big corporate manager would, push their way onto like this DIY thing. Well, I didn't think it was like, they even knew that I said that, let alone like would ever remember it. But then like, years later, Adam Levine was interviewed, and he was like, obviously, like he'd been carrying a grudge for a decade or so about this.
He's like, I'm gonna get big. Now I'm gonna give it to my cluster plug. Fuck
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy though. Like when that interview, I first saw it, someone posted on YouTube, I was just floored, that he had even remembered the gig, that it had left any sort of impact on his life whatsoever. But he seemed like he was really devastated by it. But that's the way it goes.
So you costed him much money in therapy. So nice job, Dave.
Yeah, I must have. Yeah.
Maybe you gave him the motivation to get big, so that way he could do that.
That's what she's.
So
yeah, I don't want to.
Maybe you should be saying thank you.
That's also what she said. That. So I know I gave it away earlier, but Dave, just for people who may be listening to this and not into ska for some reason, what band are you in, and where are you guys out of?
So I am in Mustard Plug, and we are out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we are a punk influenced ska band, and been around for 33 years now.
And I often, as Jess will attest to, I often brag about the ska scene here in Michigan ska. So if you would tell maybe the listeners a little bit about just the scene itself and kind of I guess what it means to the band and the followers. So
and how has it changed over the years too?
Sure. Well, it's changed a lot, a ton. Like when we first started, even going back to the late 80s, early 90s, it was more like a two-tone influence scene. And like the first bands in Michigan were like SLK in the 80s, and then Gangster Fun, I think, started like 85, 86. So at that point, this was, the Bim Skull Bim Toasters era, is primarily like two-tone influence ska. And that's when I first started going to shows back in that era. And then probably around 1990, there started to be a trickle of bands that were like combining like punk and ska, and the Exceptions of Detroit being one. And then we started in 1991, and not soon after, within a couple of years, there was also Telegraph, who's originally, they were called the Scholars, and Jack Kevorkian and the Suicide Machines, and the Parka Kings. They were pretty diverse. I don't know. Parka Kings were one of those great lost bands. They're like one of my favorite ska bands of all time. But so we were very much like a product of that 90s scene, and that pretty much, and there were some other bands in other towns besides Detroit, but it was kind of like it felt like us and the Detroit bands, you know what I mean? And we weren't technically from Detroit, but we very much felt part of that scene, and it was, a tight community, and we were super, super tight with like the Park Kings and Telegraph, but also, the Exceptions and Suicide Machines and Gangster Fun. And it was cool. It was just, I mean, it was really an amazing scene. And the thing, and I would say, even taking it further to the whole Midwest, I think the 90s, the Midwest 90s scene was absolutely one of the best, if not the best in the country. And I will totally defend it to the end. I think it got overlooked. A lot of the bands, obviously from California, got signed and became big, got their videos on MTV and all that stuff. And the East Coast bands are such an established scene there, that those bands got really big. And most of the bands in the Midwest kind of got looked over, with, the exception of the Suicide Machines, who were able to like snag a major label deal and get big and go on the Warped Tour and all that stuff. But with the exception of them, the Midwest scene kind of got overlooked. And I think it had the most diverse original scene. I mean, it's hard to put it in perspective now, but like third wave, what we think of third wave ska now is really kind of a radical departure from what came before it at the time. And you had bands like the Blue Meanies who were just crazy. You had, the Suicide Machines, obviously. You had MU330. So still, like of that era, that was so much great music and such a great tight knit community and scene. And it's had its ups and downs. I think there was kind of like, around 2000, a lot of those bands kind of like MU330 stopped touring. Blue Meanies, went away. Even Suicide Machines broke up for a little while. But the scene kind of, all these stalwarts of the scene fell apart, but the scene kept together. And like Detroit has always been a really great music town, always. And there'd be new bands that would come and go. I mean, a lot of those bands from the 2000s really haven't stuck around, but then there's been new ones. I've seen, like, this is not only Detroit, but the whole ska scene really, I feel, has gotten reinvigorated over the last, say, like 5 years. And Detroit especially so. Like it's funny because like a couple of years ago, and like we've always played the Midwest, right? And Mustard Plug's one of the handful of bands from the 90s that have never stopped touring. I mean, we've done over 2,000 shows. I don't think there's ever been a year that's gone by that we've done less than 40 shows for the last 33 years. And, we've always played, every major city in the US a couple times a year. So we kind of have our finger on the pulse of what's going on. And there was this point over the last few years where Detroit has become the biggest ska scene in the Midwest. And usually it was like not nearly as big as like Chicago. Chicago was really big, for a long time. And there's, all this other stuff. And it's just interesting. There's like a bunch of new bands. There's like really great clubs. And there's the whole, just Michigan ska pride thing, and it's really inspiring. It's cool. So yeah, it's changed over the years, definitely. Like you said, when I first started, it was like, there were scooter clubs, there was a lot of skinheads, it was all kind of two-tone. And then, after the 90s, like ska punk became like this almost the status quo. So it kind of changed over completely. And now it's just kind of like in this cool place. I think people are, the scene's really one of the friendliest in the country. And it's just really supportive thing. It's cool.
Very cool.
So you're talking about Detroit having some of the better ska scene right now and some upcoming bands. Who do you have your eye on right now?
Oh, Killer Diller are great. I think they're just they're an awesome band. Really, really digging them. Boy Detective, we played our first show with them a couple months ago, and I thought they were really, really good too. So yeah, I don't know. We'll probably get to this, but we're doing a big like holiday show this year in Detroit, and we tried to pick some of our favorite bands for that one, like local ones. And so, Traders are also on it, and new band out of Flint called the Write Ups are on it as well. So yeah, it'll be a good mix.
touch on that show for a second. I know we will end with it just to promote it.
Sure.
But so, and you can tell me the year, but I do not remember the last time you guys did not play Black Christmas. So is Scala Days kind of the hey, all your favorite ska bands will not be at Black Christmas this year. We're gonna be there 2 days beforehand. Like, is this the trade-off?
So basically, so we've done our holiday shows, and they're always between Christmas and New Year's, in Chicago and Grand Rapids for like 23, 24 years, right? And we used to always do one in Detroit. We did that for like a decade or something, right? And they were fun. We always did them at the Magic Stick, and Gangster Fun played a bunch, Park Kings, Telegraph, all those bands, and Coffee Cats played them. And they were always all ska, but they were always heavily ska and favorite bands. So I don't know what it was, 6 or 7 years ago, Black Christmas came along, and they asked us to do that instead. And we're like, well, okay, cool, yeah, it's a big event, and Suicide Machines were headlined it for years. But we also were a little sad. We kind of missed doing our own little show at the Magic Bag. I mean, I'm not Magic Bag, Magic Stick, sorry. So much magic in Detroit, but yeah. So we just kind of missed doing our own show. And last year's show, I mean, honestly, at the last Black Christmas last year, it was weird because like we previously it had been like a mix of bands and like 4 different stages, and just you walk in any room, you didn't know what you'd find. Whereas last year it was like the big room was all hardcore bands, and Magic Stick was like a mix of punk and ska.
They put all the ska kids upstairs, is what they did last year.
Yeah, so it kind of like and it kind of didn't make sense to us, like why, it felt like 2 completely separate shows, and it's like, so we've always kind of missed doing our own thing. So we're like, well, next year let's just do our own thing in the Magic Stick. And so that's where we're at. And we wanted to we decided it made sense. Like we didn't want to step on Black Christmas toes by booking a bunch of punk bands. So we're like, okay, we'll just do like all ska and have a big party, and that way it's not really competing with them so much. And because we're still friends with the Black Christmas people, and I respect them, and hope they have a really successful event. But we're just like, okay, let's do our own thing. It's gonna be completely separate. It's gonna be all ska. It's just gonna be like that. And so yeah, we're stoked about it.
And it will probably be one of the concerts of the year for me. It is going to be an amazing show.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
I cannot wait that night.
Yeah, and that time period, like I said, we've done doing these holiday shows for like almost 25 years now, and it's just something about like, you've had your like all your holiday get-togethers with your family, and there's a lot of stress involved. There's kind of like a lot of forced social interaction sometimes, and it's like there's just like, okay, did the food turn out right? Did I get the right present? Did blah blah blah? This person mad at me, whatever. And all that stuff's done. And you can just like have a night out and relax with your friends, and just it's always just like the vibe is cool.
I'm also looking forward to your Grand Rapids show. I don't think you have lived until you've seen Musterbug play a hometown show. Whole different world. Like in Michigan, I've seen you guys in a couple states, and seeing you in Michigan is a whole different experience than seeing you outside of the state. But then seeing you in Michigan and seeing you in Grand Rapids is a whole different experience than seeing you in any other part of Michigan. So I am looking forward to that one for sure.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm trying to remember, is it Boob Sweat and Dance Contraption playing with you?
Yeah, and Electric Six.
Yeah.
So
that's gonna be a good show too.
Yeah, it'll be cool. So our old
last year was a lot of freaking fun with Flatfoot.
Oh yeah,
Flatfoot. That was a real good time.
A good time too. So yeah, it's cool. Again, that's like we've been doing that holiday show there, and the cool thing about that is just like we're playing the big room in the intersection, which is like a huge room. It's like, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 capacity room. So it has like a giant stage, so we can have like all sorts of people on stage, and Santa Claus might visit and stuff like that, and do all sorts of Christmas decorations. And it's a big room, so there's like people don't feel quite so claustrophobic, which is nice. And it has a different vibe than some of our other shows. Like in Grand Rapids, we usually play the Pyramid Scheme a lot, which is a great like 400 capacity room, and it's like it's small, people are crammed in and sweaty, and that's really fun too. but it's a different vibe, you know, and it's kind of cool to do both, you know. So we're stoked about it. And this is our first time playing with the band Electric Six, which we're pretty stoked about because our old bass player, Matt Van, who people know he was in Telegraph for a long time. And, you know, he's probably played with the Park Kings, I think, for a second. And basically every ska band from the 90s in Detroit he was in. And then he was in Mustard Plug for, I think, a couple of years. We did one album with him. And then he quit to join Uncle Cracker's band and then eventually quit that and joined Electric Six. So this will be fun. You know, we have a buddy in that band playing with his band for our first time.
Nice.
Cool. I'm gonna say, as somebody on the outside looking in at the Michigan Ska crew, because I'm out here in Philly, it's really hard to be friends with these guys and see all the shows they get to experience and just how the community is there. And we're trying to build that up here. But what
Cool.
you guys have out there is so special.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, Philly probably gets as many, if not more, ska shows, I would think, but it's Detroit definitely has a community, you know?
Yeah, we're lucky with Broken Goblet, where you've played This Is Not Corn Fest and some other
Yeah.
shows and whatnot. We're lucky with that place because he brings in a lot of ska shows, but besides that, there's really not that much.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, but
Yeah.
nothing what I hear these guys talk about. And I get to be in
Right.
chats with them and hear about this all the time. And I'm like, man, I'm in the wrong place.
I
Well,
think to give credit to Joel, you know Joel, right? I think Joel
Yeah.
Tasting, he actually
Okay.
did a very good job of connecting all the fans together
Mhm.
and really creating kind of like this bond that we all knew each
Yeah.
other, and we're like, dude, we're gonna go to ska shows and we're gonna hang out and we love each other kind of thing. So
Yeah.
and he got the flag, so we got to give him credit for the flag.
Oh, we started making the flag last night. I'm warning you.
Oh shit.
Started our Philly flag. You'll see it at Corn Fest.
Well, it's cool, man. I really dig it. I mean, Denver has a good like Denver ska scene as well, where they have a big posse of people, and it makes a big difference because you know, one of the things to have like a really successful like music scene like that is I mean, you got to have the support for the bands at every level, right? So it's not just like, you know, when like the Mighty Bosstones come through town that people go and see them. Like that's fine and everything, but you need to support like the bands that are just starting, the bands in the middle, bands all the way across the spectrum in order to be a really thriving scene. And so that's what's one of the great things about, you know, when pretty much any band comes through Detroit, you know, in another town, there might be like 15 people who can show up, but in Detroit, you know, the whole posse will show up. So it's really great. And that's what builds a scene. And the other thing that Detroit is really lucky is that like there's all sorts of different venues.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the last like I don't know how many years, a lot of venues have shut down. And so certain towns, like even massive towns, it's hard for our, like my band Mustard Plug to even find the appropriate venue, you know, and like we go to New York City and we scratch our heads and where should we play? It's like where there's not any like perfect venue, even like someplace like New York City. But Detroit, we're like scratch our heads like there's so many good venues, which one do we play? You know what I mean? And it's like that at every level. There's a good like 100-seat venue, there's a good 300-seat venue, there's a good 500-seat venue, there's a good 1,000-seat venues, and there's multiple ones. So I mean, Detroit is really, really fortunate like that. And even Grand Rapids is pretty fortunate too.
I was about to say Grand Rapids is the same thing though. You have the
Yeah,
multi-level venues that are
we're really lucky like that. It hasn't always been that way, but right now, yeah, there's like, you know, Pyramid Scheme, there's the intersection, you know, there's Skeletons, there's a bunch of other smaller things. And the cool thing I'll say about Grand Rapids too, is that all those are independently owned. You know,
nice.
it's not like it's like Live Nation and AEG owning all of them. And Detroit's sort of a mix. Detroit has had like that sort of takeover, which I think makes it harder for a scene because those can be they sometimes can be harder to work with, but it's still Detroit being Detroit. Those venues still have a pretty independent attitude, even the ones like Magic Stick is I think run by AEG, and St. Andrews Hall is like Live Nation now. Those people that are running those still have a lot more independent perspective than like the similar AG Live Nation rooms in say like Philadelphia or something like that. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, we're super fortunate with Broken Goblet. Like that's
Mhm.
our spot. There's a couple other independent venues as well, but when people
Sure.
play like Starland Ballroom's a big one in Sayreville, New Jersey. It's like 45
Yep.
minutes from here. And then the Fillmore in Philly and TLA and all that,
Yeah, yeah.
it's all
It's
corporate.
cool. There's what's Kung Fu Necktie, right?
Oh yeah. Was that a show there recently?
Yeah, yeah. We played there a few years ago. And that's a great little
Uh-huh.
room for sure.
Yeah, really, really good.
Yep. Yeah.
So we're talking about the scene from all across the country and who's got the best, but I'm kind of curious, what got you into the scene there, Dave? What going to shows, deciding that this ska is what you want to do and this is what you love?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I first got into like, back, you got to go back to mid late 80s. And I was like really into like the hardcore punk scene. Right. And, that was just the thing, man. It was like a total scene. And like the 80s punk scene was really cool. But like towards like, I'd say like 87, 88, it started kind of falling apart. A lot of the bands broke up, different clubs shut down, or, in the case of Grand Rapids, there used to be a lot of like shows would happen at halls, like Ukrainian halls or whatever, Polish halls. And, promoters went away, or the clubs or the halls would let them do shows. And a lot of the scene turned kind of dark and violent in certain ways. And people, it's hard to remember, but back then there was a lot of like, Nazi skinheads at shows, and just that whole scene was kind of like falling apart in certain ways, and it was very negative. At the same time, though, there was ska was bubbling up, and like I said, like mid 80s, like, talking like 1986, 87, Gangster Fun in Detroit. I mean, they were completely unique, and they were like headlining St. Andrews Hall and like selling it out. And this was a time when no one really knew what ska was. But and you had to work, it's like you didn't have Spotify. You had to really dig to find, different types of music. Um, but ska always like intrigued me, even early days of MTV, seeing like Madness and English Beat on MTV, and didn't really know what it was, that it was ska, but I was like, this is really cool. And then, over time, started piecing things together. And I was also into reggae at the time, and started digging into the early Bob Marley stuff, and like simmer down, like, oh, that's ska. Okay. So, just kind of pushing these pieces together and hearing about stuff that's going on in Detroit. And then, when I went to college in 1987 at Michigan State, and it made it easier to go to like shows in Detroit. And we had a bar in town that like Bim Scala Bim would come through, and the Toasters would come through. And we had a little baby band called Pickle Around Betty that never really went anywhere, but they helped with the scene and stuff. And it was just like, I liked it because it had the community of punk rock, had like the energy of punk rock, but it was like more positive, and it was dancey. And I also liked that it was just kind of like more, more diverse fan base, in terms of like there was more girls at the shows, there's more, minorities at the shows, there's more, just a more, all-encompassing diverse thing going on. And that was like always what ska's been about. So yeah, and especially coming from like West Michigan, where there was like at the time, especially around Muskegon, there was a lot of like Nazi skinheads and stuff. And that was just such a bummer to me, and have this like music that was one of the pillars of what it's all about is anti-racism. So that was another thing that attracted to me about it. And yeah, and so, I just started going to more and more shows. And, I think it was like probably 1990, 91. There was this huge tour that came through. They played Ann Arbor, and it was I think it was called the International Beat, which was made up of like English Beat members and specials. Oh no, it's Special Beat. That's what it's called. Special Beat is
It's Special Beat. It was, yep. I was
Yep.
at that show.
Yeah, I think it was at Nectarine Ballroom, I think. And it was in Ann Arbor, and the Toasters played. I think the Skylights played. It was so long ago, I can barely remember, but it was amazing. I had a fanzine back then. I interviewed Ranking Roger backstage for my fanzine, and it was just the coolest, right? And I ran into Colin, our guitar player at the show, and I'd kind of known him from going to like hardcore punk shows in Grand Rapids. And I didn't know him real well. I knew his girlfriend better than I knew him, type of thing. But I'm like, we just started talking about, we were like the only two dudes from Grand Rapids that were at that show. And And so we're like, you know, we're both graduating from college about the same time. It's like 91, we should start a ska band. And he's like, yeah, let's do it or whatever. And so when we got back, we actually did it. We just like gathered all our friends together who like mainly from the punk scene. Anyone that wanted to be in a ska band basically joined Mustard Plug and just kind of went from there.
Where you talk about I guess late 80s, early 90s, but there was it was kind of odd because there was this moment of like you had Gangster Fun, you had the Exceptions, but you did have a lot of the Nazi skinheads showing up at shows. You had Almighty Lumberjacks of Death at that point in
Right.
time that
Yeah.
people would show up for. And it was such a weird, diverse, like, are you going to be okay, or are you going to get your ass kicked by a skinhead tonight kind of show?
Right. Oh,
Definitely
for
a
sure. Yeah.
different world today, which is
Yeah.
a much better loving thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not many people remember that scene, but yeah, totally. I mean, that's totally. It was like, and yeah, Detroit had a pretty gnarly scene, and they were like, you know, like punk gangs and skinhead gangs, and yeah, it was crazy.
New music. You have a new EP coming out December 13th, which is before this episode is going to drop. So by the time listeners hear this, they're going to have heard your EP. Tell us what went into recording that. Why did you make it? Yeah, just share some stuff about it.
Sure. So the story is this. When we went to record our last record, you know, and we got released about a year and a half ago. And we went to the blasting room to record it and stuff. And we wrote most of those songs during COVID, and we ended up with like 18 songs or something like that. We just had a ton of them. And we went in and with like 18 songs, and Nate, our drummer, went in first, right? He flew out to Colorado and recorded drum tracks for like 3 days to all 18 songs. And then the rest of the band gets there, and we're like, you know, like Bill, our producer, he's like, dude, you cannot fit. You don't have time to record all these songs. You just don't. And we're like, and you don't want to put 18 songs on a record anyway. It's just like people will get bored. You know, so it's like, okay, pick your best 13 to 15 songs and go with that. So so first we cut off 2 off the list and just stopped there, and then recorded like the music for like two more, which eventually we decided not to put on the record. So we had these 4 songs that we thought were really good, but you know, we had some of them were recorded, some of them weren't. So we decided, you know, these are like too good to just like throw away. And some of them we just left off because they didn't fit the vibe of the record. And where did all my friends go is the name of the record. Sorry. But it didn't fit the vibe, or like it was a debate, like half the band loved the song, half the band didn't, or this or that, or you know, it's just tough when we only have so much time in the studio, and you know, we want to make all these songs as great as they can be. So, you know, we ended up picking, I don't know, like 13 songs or whatever it was. And the ones that like made the most sense for the record. And you know, it wasn't long. We're like, okay, so we have these 4 songs. Let's just decide we're just gonna like record the rest of the parts. Some need vocals, some need horns, some guitars, whatever. And then so we record those in Grand Rapids at our old bass player, Rick Johnson, has a little studio in Grand Rapids. And so then we sent those files out to the last room for them to like mix it. And so, you know, so we had those 4 original songs, and we're like, okay, 4's kind of a weird, awkward number. Let's dig around and see if we can like fill out enough for a full 12-inch, you know? And so we had they were just kind of dug around, and we had this song called Springtime. It was on this compilation CD it was like a tribute record to this thing called Imagination Movers, which is a children's TV show. It's kind of like I don't know, like the Wiggles or whatever. And it was actually, so we recorded one of their songs like a couple years ago and put it out, but it kind of got lost, and we're like, we should like put this on a vinyl. So we asked their permission to do that. And so we put that on. There was a version of Waiting Room that we recorded at the Blaster Room that was originally going to be on the album Can't Contain It. But then we decided not to put it on because we decided we didn't want to cover on it or whatever. So we had this thing sitting in the vault, and it was like a really good recording of it. It was better than the one we had released prior on a 7-inch or whatever. So we're like, okay, we got that out there too. So we put that on. And then we're like, okay, so what else do we do? Let's see maybe some remixes. And so we hit up Victor Rice, who's done a bunch of remixing stuff. And he was in like Stubborn All Stars and stuff like that. And we're like, hey, any interest in remixing stuff? So he remixed a couple songs for us. Like he does like this crazy like live dub remix stuff. So we had him do a couple of songs. We had him do like a song Vampire that was off our Where All My Friends Go, and he did that, and he's like, then he came up with like, well, what about this other song called Sunny or whatever, and we're like, okay, yeah, go for that, do that one too. So we did 2 of those, and then I can't remember. We decided, we really liked the Vampire one was just like okay, but it wasn't really what we had wanted. We kind of wanted more of just like a dance remix. And so we found a buddy of ours who we'd known for like 30 years, honestly, who had always been in industrial bands and stuff like that. We're like, hey, do you want to take a stab at remixing this? And so he did that. He took it, and we had to get all the original tracks in the blasting room. So he completely redid it into like this sort of like goth EDM crazy dance remix thing. And that we threw that one up on Spotify for Halloween, so you can hear it now if you haven't heard it already, and it's pretty mind-blowing. There's like we tend to we've been putting it on after our sets lately, and people have no idea it's a Mustard Plug till like wait a minute. Well, it's just hilarious. So
that sounds familiar. I think I know those lyrics.
Yeah. Like that's crazy industrial. I don't know why they're playing it, but it sounds really vaguely familiar.
It's funny. We've been listening for a while now because you were nice enough to share with us. And what was that, like a month ago? I don't know. We love the new EP.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I can't wait for everyone else to hear it and just hear it all over the place.
Well, yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, it's just like, our last album, Where Do My Friends Go, was like kind of more of a cohesive album, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of, it wasn't like a concept album or anything like that, but it was like a more cohesive ideas and that sort of thing. And these are just like random, crazy, fun stuff. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of cool, different vibe, but yeah.
Is that why you decided to release this one instead of going through Bad Time like you did with the LP, or you just wanted to do it out?
Yeah, I love Bad Time, and I think with this one, because it is just kind of like a hodgepodge mishmash, we didn't really feel the need to like make it some big grand thing that it's not. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a fun thing. And like I've had a record label for like 20 years that I release stuff on off and on. And it's gonna be frustrating, but it's also kind of fun actually putting things together, like compiling the stuff and setting the tapes where they need to be and picking the vinyl colors and getting the artwork and all that stuff. It's like it's kind of fun. And I've always been a big proponent of DIY stuff.
So something I'm gonna get on my stump speech, and then you can tell me I'm dumb, okay? But something I guess I would say the word I wasn't a big fan of with the Bad Times thing was that you kept being referred to as a legacy band. Ooh, we've brought on this legacy band. They're not just a legacy band, they're just a good fucking band. And I hate when like these labels kind of start when in the end it's just a good band. Like, what does legacy mean in the end? And how does that work? I just think Plug is a good fucking band in the end.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's so much stuff that's just like marketing. You know what I mean? And it's like someone's trying to think about how to sell something, sell a product, market something. And so they think like, what do we do? I mean, legacy band. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's pros and cons. It's a double-edged sword because like on one hand, it's like I'm really proud of our legacy. I'm proud of like the work we put into like the last 33 years and like our place that we are in the scene and the fact that we have a lot of fans. I'm really proud of that. but you also like risk of like, oh, does it make us sound like we're washed up has-beens, you know? So,
Yeah, that was
you
my
know,
concern, honestly.
right. And there's a lot of that stuff. You know, I don't really sweat it that much. You know, I guess, you know, we've been in it long enough, where we've gotten like lots of love, we've gotten shitty reviews, we've gotten ignored, we've gotten all sorts of stuff, like good things and bad things. And you know, I just don't worry about it that much anymore, you know? So
There was that one dude. Eric, do you want to go into this?
The random dude who moved to Michigan, who was like, Mustard Plug is not a good band in all of Michigan ska, like got pissed off and told him off. Do you remember this?
yeah, I do. I
That was
do.
hilarious.
I'll tell you. And then I will.
Balsatini, something along those lines. That's how I remembered it.
So, what are your
I
thoughts
wonder if he
on that?
listens.
Oh man, that was kind of hilarious. I mean, I did it really. It felt good that so many people stepped in to defend us, for sure. I mean, that was really kind of heartwarming. I almost kind of felt bad for him at a certain point because it's like he just got trounced, you know?
I think he was looking for some sort of attention, just in the wrong places and the wrong ways, and didn't
Yeah,
really
Some kind of
expect
attention.
the outcome that he got from that.
Didn't know
yeah,
what he was walking into.
right, exactly.
But we
Oh,
did do a segment on the show called Skananigans, and we started talking about. I'll let you tell him what the segment's about, Eric, since it's yours.
So, Shenanigans is we asked to hear, and hopefully you have some good ones for us because you've been around for a little bit. Either your craziest, weirdest, most humorous, or my favorite, most traumatic tour story, and we've added on the most recently we've added on
The
the
craziest fan.
craziest, like psychopathic like fan that you've ever ran into.
And we did that because we started hearing stories about these crazy tour stories that were revolving around a certain fan. And I was like, well, what if it's not a fan? What if it's an anti-fan, like this guy?
Anyway, so what is think of like a like ooh, what is a tour story you want to tell?
Oh wow. I always get stumped by this because it's like it's a long a lot of stuff.
You got a couple years to choose from.
You've played how many
Yeah.
shows?
Yeah, I think we're at like over 2,000 now.
So while you
Yeah,
can I pause you while you think about that? Because I've had a question and I'm gonna forget to ask you.
sure.
Every single you know where I'm going, Jess, right? Every single show you're like, and we are gonna play this song that we played 2,800 and whatever number of times. It's right on Scott or sorry, Scott, right? But either way, is that a real number? Is that how many times you played, or you just make up a random number every show?
So it's
Right on
it's
Scott.
it's somewhat close. Like
Oh,
here's the thing. Like Jim Hofer, who does our website, we just transitioned to a new website because our old some technical thing, but up until fairly recent, we had a list of every single show we ever played on our website, right? So we knew exactly how many shows we played. And this is up until like 2 weeks ago or something like that. And he's working and putting that back up on our website. I don't think it's there yet, but we knew pretty much where our 2000th show was in San Antonio, Texas, last I think it was last February. So we had that like completely nailed, and it was, I mean, it's just we didn't plan to be in San Antonio, Texas. That's just the way it worked out, obviously. And so we went and we brought like those giant inflatable like number balloons, had 2,000, threw them up on stage. It was fun. So since then, I just come up and prior to that and after that, I just make up a number, honestly, but it's pretty close. You know what I mean? So it's, if I was going on stage right now, I'd say, this is our 2037th show ever, you know?
and we would all believe you. We'd all be like, yeah, we're at the 2037.
I mean, it's probably within
This
10
record
either
right
way.
here today.
It's probably within 10 either way, but you know, it doesn't matter because the spirit is there. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
So I interrupted with my curiosity. So do you have a crazy or interesting or traumatic tour story for us?
Oh wow. Well, for a long time I said like our tours are almost always good as long as our van doesn't break down.
Okay.
And if like we almost all our shows, we so rarely have a bad show. You know what I mean? It's almost like a novelty when we do now at this point.
You're playing with Maroon 5.
Yeah. Hey, actually, it was still a fun show. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I'd have a real hard time thinking about like really bad shows in the last 10 years. I mean, whatever. There's been a couple, but not very many. So that pretty much holds true. But we were just thinking like there was this one show, this is probably 15 years ago, maybe 20, I don't know, 15. Yeah. When we were playing, we got offered like 4 shows with Less Than Jake in the South, right? And I think they were like, up and down like the southeastern, whatever, seaboard. And we were playing, I think it was Myrtle Beach, um, South Carolina. And we played like the House of Balloons. It was an awesome show and everything, but our van died, and it was like something really bad, like it needed new transmission or whatever. And it was probably the beginning of a run. We still had like I think we still had like 4 or 5 shows left to do, and there were big shows like House of Blues size shows. So we're like, and this thing was like, it needed a lot, like it was major problems. And we've been having trouble with that specific van for a while. And so we're like, we can't miss a show. I mean, we've missed less than 10 shows out of like the last 2000. And these are big shows, especially. And the thing of it is, if you have to miss a show because your van breaks down, you're missing like the chunk of money you're gonna get paid, you're missing the sales, you're like missing the opportunity of gaining those fans. So it's like, no matter what it costs, you try not to miss any shows like that. So we ended up like renting a van, and and we had our trailer in our van, and we do the next like 3-4 shows, and they're cool. But then we decide, like this van is going to cost like $4,000 to fix, and it was like a $6,000 van. We hated this van because it kept breaking down, kept costing us money, and it would break down, and we had to like rent quick, hustle to find a rental car and get a cab there and rent it, and then do the tour, and then bring it back. And it happened like 2 or 3 times with this piece of shit van. And so like, fuck it, we are leaving this van in South Carolina. We'll figure it out when we get back. So whatever. So we, hook our trailer up to like a rental van, a one-way rental, and the tour's done. We're driving straight back from like Atlanta or Florida, wherever it was. We're in like Appalachia, and all these hills and stuff, and we're driving down, and the tongue of our trailer that hooks like the trailer to like the ball hitch thing of the van breaks in half in the middle of the highway in the middle of the mountains. And we're like, no. So and like that trailer was just like, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And so we ended up like, the tow truck guy came, and we threw all the crap into like the rental van that we had, our merch and whatever. And we're just like, to the tow truck guy, we're just like, you can have the trailer, like whatever, like we're done. And so we just drove home. So we returned home without a van or a trailer. It was just like the worst ever. And we eventually, whatever, licked our wounds and bought new stuff that was like way better, didn't break down. But yeah, that was a rough one.
I'm curious.
He went with traumatic, Eric. I hope you're happy.
There's more yes.
He went with the traumatic story. So Eric's got a thing with the traumatic.
I'm a little emo girl on
shenanigans stories.
Well, trauma plus time equals comedy, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
I'm curious too. I know I'm gonna, believe it or not, Jess, I'm gonna rabbit trail onto a different subject.
You're gonna divert from the outline here.
Yeah, but I am so serious, or curious. So you've been doing this for 3 decades. You
Mhm.
also have a family, you have a job. How does that whole balance work? Like you guys tour a lot. You're not like, ooh, we play a show every 5 months and it's exciting for somebody. How do
Right.
you how does the whole balance between family, work, muster plug kind of work for you guys?
Well, that's tough. And it's like one of the hardest things about being in a marginally successful band. You know what I mean? Like if you're like not successful at all, you just play the barn down the road. If you're successful, then you make money off it. You get a tour bus, you like support your family off of it. But if you're just marginally successful like us, it's really hard because then you still have to have a day job, you know, that sort of thing. You can't support your wife and kids, all, you know, whatever. Um, so finding that balance has been like really, really tough. And you know, in the 90s, you know, the band, it was easy to live in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids at the time was really cheap to live. And like at the height like of our career in the late 90s, I remember we each got $700 a month, right, from the band. And that was enough to like pay our rent and maybe some food and some, you know, whatever. You could
Yeah.
basically almost survive off that. But then like you know, things change and Grand Rapids got more expensive. You know, some of us started getting married, like wanting to buy a house, pay a mortgage, have kids, stuff like that. So around 2000, you know, I started having kids, and you know, my wife. I'm lucky that my wife has a full-time job, and so I basically became a stay-at-home dad, and you know, and would do the band as well, and we would do like, you know, we were still doing quite a few shows. Like we went from doing probably 150 shows to like 80 shows to like 70 shows, and then it kind of bounced around to like 50 shows, and it is hard to figure out what that balance is, and it would be different for every person, I think, you know. Um, you know, I think I was lucky in that, like, because I was a stay-at-home dad, and I never felt like my kids didn't know me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with them when I was at home. Um, but I mean, but it's tough. And then, you know, I like again, like I had like part-time. I did some part-time work here and there when I was home. And my wife worked full time, and I did the band, made some money. So it's just kind of like piecing it together and making it work. But yeah, it's tough. And like, you know, things have changed since then. You know, I started when my kids were in school full time, I said, you know, I need to get a full-time job, but I wanted one that was flexible enough to still do the band because I always loved being in the band. So I became a realtor, and that's actually I've been able to work that in a way that's flexible enough that I can still go on tour, help people help me show houses when I'm gone, and can do a lot of stuff remotely. So that's actually been a really great job for me. And the rest of the guys, they've been it's not easy, but they've found jobs that they can go out on tour as well, which is really challenging. And you know, it's tough. It's hard to get, you know, a really well-paying job that'll let you tour, and you know, that's the sacrifice, you know, of being in a band sometimes, because you know, the guys have been like bartenders or baristas or just kind of put stuff together. Um, and it's tough, you know, it's everything's a trade-off, you know, you trade off time with your family, you trade off like having a well-paying career versus something that's flexible, you know. Um, but yeah, and it's probably the toughest thing about being in a band, and there's so many like biographies of bands that like, oh, you know, we would have broken up, we were just on the road too much or whatever. Or, you know, I remember one time we were out on tour with like Less Than Jake, again, a different tour. And you know, we were hanging out with them on their tour bus, and like, God, I think three of them had recently gone through divorces. And I'm like, oh, geez. I mean, they're like way more successful than us. They make a lot more money. They're in a tour bus, but like, fuck. I mean, I've been married 23 years. So I mean, it's a trade-off. It's gonna like, you know, if you spend too much time on the road, it has negative, you know, it's going to affect you negatively in either your relationships or financially or this or that. So it's a big challenge, and you know, every band has to find that challenge if they want to stick around, find that balance if they want to stick around. And I think we've been pretty good about that. And we're at this point where our horn players, they both have young kids. Um, But and then one of the reasons why we added a third horn player like 3 years ago is so like if one of them needed to take a tour off, you know, for whatever, they could do that. As long as 2 out of the 3 horn players are there, we're gonna hit the road. So that's been a good solution for us. But yeah, it's tough finding that balance, but that's key.
And you guys have had a pretty solid lineup for a long time.
Yeah.
Probably to I mean, for a band your size, for a lot of bands that are out there, like if you go to
Right.
some bands websites, like you'll see like
Yeah.
104 different people who have been in the band, and you don't have that with Mr. Plug, I don't feel.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot of-
Gordello is a prime example of that.
Yeah. Or even like, you know, it's a little weird sometimes because like a lot of our friends, like Big D and the Kids Table or, you know, the Toasters, they have like one original band member, you know what I mean? And like
That's what I was thinking of. I just didn't want to call them out. So thank you, dude.
well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm just happy they're both around, you know what I mean? And that's one solution to like make it work, whatever. I'm glad those bands are still touring, but it's tough. But yeah, we've been lucky. Our horn guys, like Colin and I've been in it all 33 years. Our horn guys have been in it for probably at least 25 years. And then Nate, our drummer's been in it for like 20. And we have a relatively new bass player. He's been around, I don't know, 3 to 6 years, depending on how you look at it. He was subbing for Rick, our old bass player, for like 3 years, and then became a permanent member, I think, right around pre-COVID, a year before COVID, something like that. So yeah, it's been steady lineup, but yeah, it's tough, but make it work.
Did you ever imagine that you'd still be releasing EPs, you know, 30 plus years later with Colin when you guys decide you want to start your ska band?
There's no way I would imagine that. Because when the band started, it was just like getting some friends together to like have fun, play a basement, you know, whatever. It was not something like that. We just took it one step at a time, and it just kept on getting bigger and kept going. But there's no way I'd imagine we'd still be like playing 33 years later. And honestly, if you'd asked me 15 years ago if we would be releasing music, you know, at this point, I would have said, nah, we won't be doing that. We'll probably be playing a show here and there, maybe. But, you know, so I'm really happy that we're as active as we are and we're still putting out music, you know?
And you're obviously still having fun doing it, or you want to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only reason to do it. You know?
Yeah, it reminds me of one of your more favorite songs of mine is Take on the World. You know, it falls right in line with that.
Yeah.
People kept showing up to shows, so kept going on, don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was about 7 months or so ago. I asked you if I could use one of your songs for this podcast right here, Brain on Ska. I don't know if you remember exchanging emails with me.
Another picture or two. They don't have my rounds and the night was through. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska. Dancing on the floor, just hopping and skanking. DJ on the mic, pulling non-stop ranking. Give me any music that'll move my feet. Give me any music with a two-tone beat. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska. My hats and Fred Perry shirts. Drinking cheap beer and chasing skuts. But what it's really all about is play, dance, say. Simply having fun and unity. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska. This is your brain. This is your brain on ska.
I never imagined that we would be having you on here in that same year. It's awesome. But we've got a fan question that actually falls right in line with that. What is the inspiration for Mr. Smiley?
Oh, wow. It's tough. You know, Colin wrote that song, so and I don't, it's not based on anything real. It's just a story he made up. I don't know. I don't think there's any real specific thing. And I don't know how he pulled that out of the air. And I wish there was a story, but as far as I know, there isn't. But you'll have to have Colin on the podcast sometime. You can grill him about it.
Note to self. Do you want to circle back to the EP, Ryan, and do Brain on Ska for that?
Well, it starts off with "Hey," title for it. That's one of the new songs for the record, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And that was just sort of like, it was kind of I can remember like being stuck at home during COVID, and like Colin was sending out music, and we were sharing files online. And I remember like I like the hectic energy of it. And so I just wanted, for some reason, I just want to try to do like sort of a stream of consciousness thing where you just throw out a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? I always liked like kind of like, you know, like REM's "It's the End of the World," End of the World as we know it, like that song, or, you know, Some Trading Homesick Blues by Bob Dylan, where they're just like spitting out tons of crazy shit. And so that was kind of like the vibe of it. And the demo's fun. I had my daughter sing like the chorus on it, which was pretty cool. Yeah, I always kind of liked that song, and it was one of those that kind of got, you know, we didn't put on the album. It was and I'm glad it got resurrected. So yeah, that's cool. I'm trying to think. The other one, there was one. I'm trying to think what the next one is. There's one that Colin does that I can't really comment on because he wrote all that one.
Oh, that's Take Me With You.
Oh, Take Me With, yeah. So he recorded a version of it in the studio, and he didn't really like it, and so it never got finished. So he really redid the whole thing, like everything, new lyrics, changed the vocal melody, all sorts of stuff. So it's like, you know, it's like taking the frame of a car and putting a different car on top of it, or whatever. I mean, it's like a completely different song now. Just has the bare bones. So I think it turned out way better, and I know he's really
Another
happy.
question for Colin when we bring him on, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Do you and Colin share all
the
the lyric writing, or does anyone else in the band do lyric writing as well?
It's just pretty much Colin and I. So it just kind of depends. I mean, most of the songs I sing, I write lyrics for, and vice versa, but not always. I mean, there's like, I can't remember, there's some songs where like I'll write stuff and he'll sing it, and the other way around, but that's generally that, you know. And then I'm trying to think what else is on the record. There's the West Coast, which started as just like, we were doing a West Coast tour a couple years ago, and we just decided to write a stupid song to like hype up the tour, and we ended up liking it more than we thought we would. So we went and recorded it in the studio. And it's funny because like Bill Stevenson, our producer, he got done tracking. He's like, guys, this song West Coast, I hate it. It's the worst. It's gonna be huge. It's like, this will be the most popular song on the record. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of this stupid earworm. And I don't know. I mean, when we first started the band, you know, we would just like write a lot of stupid songs. If you listen to like Ska Talk now and Big Day Multitude, there's some pretty lightweight songs, but they're really fun. You know what I mean? And sometimes when you don't think too hard and you just throw shit on paper and record it, those are some of those fun songs. It was kind of fun to just do a song like that. And songs that you like, you know, in theory, you might think are like a throwaway song, are some of the best songs ever because they're just fun.
Waking up at 4 a.m. and meeting at the fan. Grab a bunch of duffel bags and shoving all I can. Rush out to the airport, it's time to catch my plane. Flying off into the clouds, I'm coming home again. On the West Coast, it's the place that I love the most. Only on the West Coast, it's the place that I wanna go. Phoenix, Las Vegas, LA, San Diego, Portland, Seattle, Foggy, San Francisco, Vancouver Island, Garden Grove, and Eugene, Oregon. I'm heading out tomorrow 'cause there's something going on. place that I love the most, only on the West Coast. It's the place that I wanna go, going to the West Coast, West Coast, West Coast, the West Coast, the West Coast, West Coast, West Coast, the West Coast, the West Coast.
I was gonna say, that's one thing that I love about Muster Plug is you guys can go just have some fun songs, but
Yeah.
also you can go extremely deep at the same time. You get both sides of maybe the ska world. You get the fun kind of silly danceable songs, and you get some of the deeper songs, and even
Yeah.
Vampire, which I mean, hey, made it into a movie, and you got called out on that movie. But either way, that actually, as fun as it is, it's an extremely deep, or at least I find it to be a deep song at the same
Yeah.
time.
Well, it came from a very serious place, and that was like
Yeah.
very much inspired by Donald Trump back like years ago. The first Donald Trump version one.
I'm
And
sorry you had to do a version 2, by the way, no offense,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I hope it
yeah.
doesn't
I
get
know.
put in
We'll be
there.
looking out for that.
Yeah. So I mean, but the cool thing about Vampire is like you can take it from that perspective, or you can take it as just like a fun Halloween song if you want, either way. And I think that's kind of cool.
Is there anything else that you have in the vault that you guys have made and not released yet?
Ooh, not really. I think we've pretty much cleared out the vault.
Okay. So it's going to be all new from here on out.
Yeah, exactly.
Different brain on ska, Ryan?
I think that's all I
There's
have.
a whole
as far
segment
as-
named after a song that you guys made.
I know.
Brain
What
on
is
Ska.
what is the inspiration for Brain on Ska? Where did that one come from? Since you guys play it at every show.
Yeah, that was literally the first song we ever wrote. And it was just kind of like a ska song about ska. I mean, and it's one of those songs again, it's like it's kind of a lightweight song, but there's a lot of serious sentiment in it as well, So it's cool. It's kind of fun to like have your first song be like sort of a blueprint, you know what I mean? A manifesto in a way. So yeah, it's just all about just love of ska music.
It kind of makes sense if that would be your first song and why you'd play it with at every show with the way the scene was at that point in time. I mean, you're talking about not being able to go to a show without knowing if you're going to get jumped or not, to have a song that's dedicated to ska and the love of community and, acceptance of one another, I think that's pretty awesome.
So, Jess, anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I have a couple of random questions.
All right.
Okay.
You did. That was my segue for you. Brian. I'm helping you.
What are some bands or albums that you find yourself listening to today?
Ooh, nice.
Just in general or ska?
Yeah, in general. It doesn't
In
have
general.
to be ska. It could be whatever.
Good music is good music. So,
Yeah. Wow.
What did you listen
That's funny
to
because
today?
I just did that, the Spotify Wrapped thing,
Okay.
ooh,
So
yeah.
shows
What
you-
was your top 5? This could be
There we
interesting.
go. That's good.
Yeah, I see if I don't have to get my phone with me, but I remember what my I remember what my number 1 was and my number 5 was.
All right.
And, number 1, and there was The Clash, and that doesn't really surprise me at all. Because I just love The Clash. I think they're one of the best bands of all time, and I still like. And there's such diversity there. I mean, they're one of the few bands like the Specials put out the best ska record of all time, right? But it's just kind of like they just really put out 2 records, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? Whereas The Clash has a whole catalog. They put a bunch of records out. I don't know what it is, 6, 7 records, and they're all great. Every single one is great. So yeah, they're always up there. I mean, there's Bob Marley's usually in there. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I think it's like I don't know why they came up with what it did, but number 5 was really interesting because I listened to him. I didn't realize I listened to him that much, but it was Something to Do, who are like one of my favorite ska bands. Like they're not really a new band, but they're still up and coming after all these years. And I think they're one of the most underrated bands in North America right now. I just think they're great songwriters. We just did 3 shows with them, Wisconsin and Milwaukee, Madison, Minnesota. And they're just really good songwriters and they're really good players. We actually brought them, to Detroit fairly recently. So
I
maybe,
was gonna say,
The
they
30-0.
with you.
exactly.
Yeah.
They ended up
And they're
making
great
top
people.
five.
So.
Yeah, and their last couple records have been really, really good.
They just released one this year, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Probably one of
they're
the best albums of the year, but
Mhm.
my humble opinion, we'll talk about the end of the year. But
Don't give away it yet.
I'm
I've
sorry.
had Draw Me Like One of Your French Girls stuck in my head for like the last 4 days. I woke up with it in there, and it was just all week long I've been singing it at work, which is really awkward when you work in trades around a bunch of other electricians. You're saying Draw Me Like One of Your French Girls.
Yeah, so good. Other weird stuff. I listen to the Flaming Lips, are one of my favorite bands. This is a poster. I mean, like I've been gotten this weird Death Cab for Cutie kick lately of their newer records. I mean, I listen to a lot of reggae. I don't know.
But speaking of bands that you've had played shows with, I was wondering, my next question was, is there any particular band or a couple bands that you discovered through them opening up for you, like local support, that you would have maybe not discovered any other way, that you really like?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Or even doing a festival, like a band playing at a festival, whatever.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I'm gonna like think of like half a dozen as soon as I like end this interview.
Uh-huh.
I have a really hard time like thinking stuff like that on the spot. I mean, So Many Do definitely are one that they started opening up for us, and I think they're just a great band. I mentioned before, Killer Diller is such a great live band.
Yeah.
Even just like Catbite started opening up for us, and before they really had even barely released anything. Catbite fan, as are many people. Yeah, I'm trying to think who else. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like
I'm gonna think of 9 more after this call.
yeah, I know. I will think of seriously.
I am wearing my Killer Diller shirt. I just want to point that
Oh,
out.
awesome. Very cool.
They literally get better with every single show they do.
Yeah, they're fantastic. For sure.
My last random question is, besides Michigan, where's your favorite place to play? It can be a venue, a city, whatever.
Favorite place to play?
It can be Michigan. Just saying.
Yeah, outside of Michigan. Okay, so Denver really loves Mustard Blood for sure. That's pretty. I mean, we're like rock stars in Denver. I don't know why, but we played to 1,000 people there. It's bizarre. I don't get it, but I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, that for sure is fun. We just had a really good tour last year in Florida, which I didn't expect it to be good.
Was this where you went from Georgia to Florida?
Yeah, it was like a year ago, I think, with the Voodoo Glow Skulls, and
me and Joel went to see you in Georgia on that tour.
oh
You did?
yeah.
Voodoo Glow
That's great.
Skulls. Was it Bite Me Bambi or am I crazy? It may have been.
Yeah, Bite Me Bambi. Yeah,
Yep, that was
They're
such a
another
good
great band.
show.
Yeah, they're another great band for sure. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I always enjoy it. We've been doing a West Coast tour for like 15 years in a row. They've been fun because so we can go back and we like play a lot of the same clubs, and we've built up a really good crowd there. And you can go to we have our favorite restaurants, stuff like that. We've been playing Mexico lately a little bit, and I love Mexico. I mean, we're not big in Mexico, but we're working on it. You know what I mean? Because I just love Mexico in general, and the ska scene there is ridiculously big. So it's again.
Oh yeah, those crowds are huge down there, huh?
Yeah.
Nuts. Like there's a festival there called Ska Talk that we went to, and there's like 60,000 people there, and it's all ska. It's crazy.
I see
It's like
Mexico and Japan both look huge for ska.
Yeah, Japan is really fun. It's one of my favorite places to tour, but it's not really that much bigger than the United States.
Okay.
The scene. I mean, like most of the shows, yeah, like there's I mean, there's a handful of bands like probably like Tokyo Ska Paradise or whatever, and that can draw like 1,000 people, right? And Kamuri can probably draw 1,000 people, but there's a lot of other bands that are probably like drawing 100, 200 people. It's not that different. Like I don't think most of those bands, and maybe Tokyo Ska might be draw more than 1,000. I don't know exactly, but I like most of the bands I don't think are that much. The big bands are probably the equivalent of like the big bands here. You know what I mean? So like the biggest, like most of the big Japanese ska bands are probably like same size as like the Interrupters or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
But Mexico is nuts. I mean, those bands, the biggest ska bands in Mexico will draw 50,000 people. It's just next level. It's crazy. But yeah, those I guess those are yeah, Japan is definitely on the list of favorite places to play. So
Do you want to talk about the upcoming tour that you have coming up after your holiday shows on the West Coast with Voodoo Glow Skulls, Half Past Two?
We'll be on later.
yeah, so like the next tour we have going on is on the West Coast in January with Voodoo Glow Skulls, who we've played lots of shows with, and they're always super, super fun. It was cool.
You have a lineup. Have you?
Yeah.
It's the last time you played with Frank.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's wild because like we pretty much like we the whole tour was set up, right? And we're thinking Ephraim was singing. And then I found out like 2 weeks before that Ephraim was bowing out of the band, so it's just gonna be like George and Eddie singing or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay. And then like a week or two later, I found out that Frank was rejoining the band. I'm like, no way. And so then they announced it. And then like 2 days later, we announced the tour. So I think like people think like that we booked this tour after Frank joined the band. And it's like, no, it takes months to book a tour.
Right.
So, but it was really cool timing. So I'm excited. We're all friends with Frank, and I mean, we're friends with like, all the brothers. And I just thought it was sad that the brothers weren't hanging out, weren't buddies. They had this riff in their family. And that's just sad because I mean they're good people. So I'm as much as I'm happy for the band, I'm more happy for these brothers just to kind of reconcile and get together, And Fight Me Bambi are awesome. So it's gonna be a good tour. I meant Half Past Two. Sorry, I was thinking Half Past Two is awesome.
Half Past Two. We actually have Tara coming on Thursday night. It's funny.
Cool. Yeah, so Half Past Two, we've been wanting to do a West Coast tour with them for a while. We've done sporadic shows here and there, and that's a band that's really evolved over the years. We've been playing with them for a while. They just started opening for us, and it's cool that they've like gotten so much better, and they're on Bad Time Records now, and we're stoked that we can bring them out on the West Coast as well.
Awesome. Well, unless you have something else to plug that we don't know about, give you a chance to tell the listeners where they can find you.
I think that's the big stuff. Yeah.
That's the big stuff. Big West Coast tour coming up after the holidays.
Yep.
New EP coming out December 13th, which is this Friday the 13th. Was that planned?
Yeah, yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
We want to release December and Friday the 13th. How do you say no to that?
Yeah, why not?
Always something in the works with Mustard Plug.
For sure.
So we end with the same message. I'm going to ask for your help with this because you've been around for more than a couple months, let's say. So our message is always, if you want a ska scene, if you want, I think Michigan has an amazing ska scene. I really do. But if you want a scene, people need to be part of that scene. So as somebody who's been around for 30 years or so, maybe inspire folks if they're listening on Spotify, but they're not showing up at shows. Why should people show up at shows for local bands?
Oh, that's what keeps it all together. That's what keeps like the whole thing together. You know what I mean? It's like the shows. So yeah, coming out to shows, like everything works together because like you need people coming out to the small shows, supporting the little bands. Little bands support the bigger bands. Get the word out. Get people coming to shows. I mean, if people stop buying tickets, bands aren't going to tour, and they're just going to break up, and that's going to be that. So we need people to get out of their house. Spotify's great, but and you don't really have a feel for the music until you've seen it live, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, ska music is all about the live show, and that's where it's at.
I agree. One of our favorite, I think I can say is one of our favorite bands amongst the three of us is Boy Detective. Would you guys agree? And you don't experience them until you've seen them live and listened to them on Spotify. And same thing with you guys. I've probably seen Mustard Plug more than I've seen any other band in the world. Because showing up at Mustard Plug is just, it's a good time. Like,
yeah,
people need to do that.
Mhm.
If you, for some reason, if you're listening to this and you've never seen Muster Plug live, first, you fucked up. Number two, you need to show up and see Muster Plug live if you want to have probably the time of your life.
Right on.
Make
So that
it
will be,
this support because you might discover an awesome freaking band like the Boy Detective.
sir.
Get in
Yeah.
there.
And I'll say one thing. I mean, on that, we've always strove to like bring really cool bands out on tour with us and have really cool bands open for us. That's always been. I mean, we really go out of the way to curate a whole show. You know what I mean? And I think more than a lot of bands, we really care about like, you know, keeping the roots together. You know, keeping it the whole scene together and creating our show to be a cohesive, fun night out. And that means bringing cool local bands and touring bands and the whole thing.
Yeah, I love last time we saw you here at Broken Goblet. You were with Iron Roses and Catch 22, but also the
Manipulators. Yep.
is a local Philly area band. got
Yeah.
to- and they were so stoked for that and they killed it. And that was just great.
Yeah.
Help
sure.
them get exposure and keep the scene going.
Yep. Right on.
Speaking of keeping the scene going, it takes the little ones too. And all ages is a big part of that. You guys' Ska Day show is an all ages show coming up here the 26th and 27th, correct?
Detroit and Grand
yes.
Rapids. Yes,
Yep.
that is correct.
I know Grand Rapids is all ages. I think Detroit is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. What is your message for this next generation of Rudies and Rue girls?
Oh. Get off your phone, go to a show, and have fun.
Right.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, Dave. It's honestly been a privilege and an honor to have you on our show today. We were so excited that you joined us.
Yeah. No, my
So
pleasure. Yeah, I
much for your
appreciate you
time.
having me.
We look forward to seeing you soon. Ryan and Eric will see you before I do because they'll be at the holiday shows.
Right.
We'll see you on the 26th and 27th, and we'll be sure to fanboy. So thank you so much for coming on.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Have a great night.
All right. Good night,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. You too. Merry Christmas.
You little vampire, into your house. Your house is